Okay, this is a video for somebody, my friend, who bought watercolor supplies, and her things are going to arrive, and I just wanted to give a quick way that you could open up your new supplies and do something fun and easy and get to start learning about your palette, the colors in your palette, how to load up the brush with water and paint, and just keep it super simple so that there's no pressure. So when I set up my watercolors, this is how I like to lay things out. I have 2 water jars, one that is going to become my dirty mixing water and then my clean mixing water. I have a spray bottle here that I use to spritz down my paints to activate them. Sometimes I use this on my paper if I'm looking for like a really loose style. There's some techniques you can do with that as well. And then I keep a sponge to pull the extra water off of my brush so that I'm not wasting a bunch of paper towel. I do have a couple paper towels here that I can dab up if I need to. This is my paint palette. Today I'm going to use my size 5 round brush. This is a Da Vinci Maestro. I love these brushes. They have a beautiful point on them, but then the belly of the brush is pretty nice and full, so it holds a lot of paint when you want it to. I've got just a Canson watercolor sketchbook. 140 pound is the lowest that the lightest paper I like to work with. Anything lighter than that and it gets really crinkled up. So this is a great kind of beginner sketchbook. And then I have a towel that I keep because if you want to elevate your paper, and put it on a bit of an angle, the towel, like a kitchen towel, works really well for that. And if you want to just raise it up a little bit, this is a towel that my dog had gotten to, so it was old and I wasn't going to use it for dishes anymore, but it works great for this. So you can have a small incline by doing just a gentle fold, and then if you want to raise it up higher, you can roll this nice and tight, and it gives it a little more height so that you can have a greater incline for your paper, depending on what you're working on. So for right now, I'm going to leave it flat because the first thing we're going to do is draw circles. Now my palette has, I think it's 24 colors. So I'm going to make 24 shapes on this piece of paper. I'm going to keep mine in rows. So I think what I'll probably do is 3 rows of 8. And so you can draw any shape you want. You can use a stencil if you'd like. I would say keep it kind of simple if you've never used watercolors before. I'm just going to do simple circles because I really like circles. Or I might make them kind of ovals. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, I'm going to put 24 shapes on this piece of paper. You could do them all over. You don't have to do them in a row. You could just do 24 random circles. You could have them different sizes if you want. I'm going to keep mine similar sizes, I think, and keep them in rows because I'm very orderly when it comes to those kinds of things. But if you're more free-flowing, then by all means, make yours more free-flowing. Okay, you can see that my circles are definitely not perfect. I actually think I'm going to move my paper this way, and I'm going to give it just an ever so slight incline. I like to paint that way with a little bit of an incline. You have to be careful because if you're using a lot of water and you have your paper on an incline, then your paint is actually going to move and settle to the bottom. But I'm just going to use just a little. Anyway, okay, so I've got my circles. You can see they are definitely not perfect. You have your page full of shapes, and now all we're going to do is pick up some water. Oh, the first thing you want to do is activate your paints. So you're going to use your spray bottle and just spritz across the tops of your paints to let that water settle into the paint. It just moistens everything up and activates them, so it'll be easier to pull out the paint with your paintbrush. If you leave them like really dry, then you spend a lot of time trying to work that paint out on the brush. This just makes it so that it's much easier. All right, so I'm gonna start in my first jar of water. Now, there's some techniques that I've learned I'm gonna share. Now your brush, look at how full that brush is full of water. So you can think of 1 to 10. If you're brand new and you need something to gauge, right? So each time I wipe the brush off on the side of the jar, I'm pulling water out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm about 50% of the way done. Now I could keep going until there's a very little water, and if I want an almost dry brush, I'm going to touch this sponge to pull more out. And you can see it's not as bloated and wide. I do want some water because I need to be able to mix the paint with. But I don't want it too much water, or when you go to paint your circle, it's gonna be hard to control. So, and what I'm looking for here is a milk-like consistency. You see, it's a little more than maybe tea, but it's not like super thick. So it's kind of milky, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, and then the next thing is that we're just going to fill in this shape. Now think of moving this bead. Do you see that bead of paint? What we're doing is filling up the shape by moving that bead. And I'm trying not to brush over the top of where I've been too much, because that's how you create some weird, actually, you see how you can see some of my brush marks. So if you are super smooth about this, you'll have this nice even shape without brush marks. But if you don't, that's okay too, because all we're really doing, now you see how my water is going to get really dirty by the time I'm done, but I'm going to have this clean water that I can pull from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to pull up my next color. Now I'm going fast, so you might not be able, I'm dragging my brush over the top of my paint and kind of spinning the brush. I'm not jamming the brush in there because I want to protect that beautiful fine point at the end of my brush. All right, so I'm just going to kind of, get my brush really well loaded up, and I'm mixing as I go, and then let's come back and paint the next oval. Okay, and again, I'm going to try to move this across my shape. There. And I'm going to rinse, get some clean water, and go on to my next color, which is this beautiful cerulean blue. And I'm just going to grab a little bit more. Okay. Ooh, there. I like that. Okay. Now, same thing. Let's see if I can get this really nice and smooth. One thing you'll notice is that I'm moving through the shape from top to bottom, and I'm not outlining it. Oops. When you outline it, you get kind of a weird, funky brush mark around it. And you can see this is pretty even. Now I had more paint on my brush than I needed for this size shape, so I've got kind of some excess paint down here. Again, this is just a kind of a quick little fun way to learn the colors of my paint. So these are good things to notice and pay attention to, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to just keep going. All right, there we go. This is a phthalo blue red shade, and this is love this color. I love all the colors, but I especially love the blues. Yep. Okay, and see how I went back in here? I saw that missing space. Sometimes it's better just to leave the missing space, because now I've got like a little darker spot right there. But okay. Next is this French ultramarine. Oh my gosh, so pretty. Did I tell you I love blue? I love blue. Okay. And I'm keeping these fairly, there's quite a bit of water here. They're not super intense. We can certainly make them much darker by using less water and more paint, but I like this sort of in between. There we go. One thing to note is that when you use inexpensive paper, this is inexpensive paper, the paint tends to be more washed out, and when you use expensive cotton paper, the colors tend to be more intense. And so wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is go to this. This is a phthalo green blue shade. So on this cheaper paper, it's harder to get very intense shades. It can still be done, but you have to use less water. You have to use a thicker paint consistency than if you were painting on a higher quality cotton paper. But I think for this kind of stuff, and when you're first starting out, working in these sketchbooks is really nice. It means that you don't have a lot of pressure. You're not using expensive paper that you're worried about wrecking, and you can just explore your paints and the brushes and how everything works together. So I do like these little books. I use them myself quite a bit. All right, and now Okay. Oops. All right, I'm going to keep going and click back in with you in a second. Okay, so I finished my top row, and when I work, I try to go top to bottom so that I don't take my hand and smear through it. So if I started working this way, as I'm going this way, I'm accidentally going to set my fingers in it. Even if I try not to, it's probably going to happen. And so I tend to work top to bottom and left to right. So I'm going to go back here to this far left and get my next green. This is a sap green, which is really nice to have in your, oh, perfect. Really nice to have in your palette. I did get some, but now we have two. That's my husband in the background. We're getting ready to go camping tomorrow. And so, which I like to take my watercolors with. Oh, see how much water I have in here? I had way too much water on my brush. So now, if I try to paint with that, I am going to make a mess on my paper. So I'm going to get my brush dried out, get a little more over to the side. Do you see how that looks so different? Okay, it's thicker. I'm going to use that. This is called, I think it's called Indian Red. Oh my gosh, it's such a pretty color, and it is really good for landscapes. All right. It's like this soft kind of neutral red. Make sure that I'm pulling some water out. Okay, the next one, use this one too. This is another favorite color. This is called Quinacridone Gold. I use a palette of 24 when I'm at home, but I use a palette of 18 when I travel with my paints. I don't think you ever need more than that, and I could work with a palette of 9 or 12 pretty easily. I think when you buy a palette and you have, okay, do you see how I touched that? They might bleed in together a little bit because when you have wet paint on wet paint, they flow together. And so you can see, because this is wet, that yellow is going to move into this circle. It can be a really cool effect if you want it. I love to do that when I'm painting, especially flowers and landscapes. It wasn't really my intention to do that on these little circles, but I'm not going to get upset about it. All right, I'm going to come back here and fill in this. All right. It was really hard for me not to outline and fill in when I first started painting. So now it's just really natural to work that way. There we go. So if you haven't purchased your paint supplies yet, look at palettes that are no more than 24 paints. 24 is nice because you don't have to know a lot about color mixing, but when you have those much bigger palettes, first of all, some of those colors on the inexpensive big palettes, they're so similar to one another that you're spending money for something that you don't really need. But also you have a tendency to muddy up your paintings a lot more easily. Or I think something that beginners often do is they're using too many colors. They're not limiting their palette, and then their paintings look very disjointed. So I prefer a smaller palette. One that I like that you can buy on Amazon is Art Whale. It's relatively inexpensive. It's a palette of 24. They do have 48, but I would recommend the 24. And then, make sure I'm on the right yellow. Yep. Okay. This is cadmium orange next. Cadmium. All right. There. Art Whale, a lot of those pigments are single pigment paints. And so in an inexpensive set, sometimes that's hard to find. And they tend to go down pretty nicely. There's a great selection of colors. And it's, I think, like, I don't know, $20, $22, $23. There's usually a coupon. Okay, this is one of my favorite reds. It's called Vermilion, and it's a really almost orangey red, but it mixes up some great colors and adds a lot of nice warmth. Yeah, you can see it's almost like in between orange and red. I think on the camera it's looking more orange. Okay, I've got my first 2 rows done. Now, this is called Permanent Red, and it's like that true fire engine style red. You might be wondering why this red isn't with my other reds. It's because I bought it at a much... I used to have more greens in my palette, and I realized I like mixing my greens more than using pre-mixed greens. And so I removed two greens actually and added these two colors. That was my most recent swap. And I'm pretty happy with how it is now, so I'll probably keep it this way for at least a while. Okay, so now let's paint this Permanent Red. This is pretty watered down. So that means my didn't mix the right consistency, but that's okay. This is a... Okay, see how dirty my water is? That's why it's so nice to have this extra jar of clean water, because then you're not contaminating all your paints with that mix of colors. Okay, and then the last red I have on my palette is called Carmine, and it's this really nice bluish. There's a lot of blue in it. So this you can mix to make some beautiful purples. Okay, let's come over here. And we'll rinse. I do not let my bristles touch the sides or the bottom of the jar. For the most part, I try to just agitate it in the center because I'm really, really careful with my brushes. Okay, and then the next color is, oops, sorry for getting my finger in the way there. This is Quinacridone Rose. This is, I use this in almost every painting because it's great to mix with. You can, I have one of my favorite sets of mixing would be using this Quinacridone Rose. This is Azo Yellow Medium, and then choosing this sort of cerulean blue. You just get some really vibrant colors with those, so that's pretty fun. All right. There is my Quinacridone Rose, also great for if you do florals. It's a really pretty color. Okay, and then the next color I also love is I've Quinacridone Violet right here, which I could probably make myself if I used the Quinacridone Rose with the blue violet, but I like having it pre-mixed. So it's worth it to dedicate a spot in my palette to this color. I think it's hard to get something that's as vibrant, and you can see like where it's thicker there, it gets really nice and vibrant. So I really like having that color here. And then the other color, I use this all the time. This is Permanent Blue Violet. And so it's this beautiful kind of purpley, but blue, like a blue purple. And surprisingly, it mixes really, really well with a burnt sienna. And then it makes this like really beautiful kind of rich brownish color. I use it all the time in trees. Okay, so there's that guy. I'm almost done. Okay, this is a much longer video than I planned. It's 18 minutes. It's probably going to be 20 by the time we're done, but that's okay. All right, this is my raw sienna or raw umber. I actually can't remember. I think it's raw sienna. And it's this like really nice neutral color. Okay. I'm kind of rushing here, but that's okay. All right, rinse, get some clean water, pull the extra off. The next is my, okay, so I had sprayed the paints when I first started, and you can see I haven't gotten to this paint color towards the end. And so as it has less, some water has evaporated out of it, it's taking a little more work to pull the paint out. That's part of what's happening here. And so what I could do is give them another little spritz and wait for a little while, but I'm feeling a little impatient, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to kind of work it out of the pan here. All right, and so this is burnt sienna. Okay, not do a great job filling in that circle. All right, and the last color I have on my palette here in this corner is Van Dyke Brown, which is really, it's got almost like a Payne's Gray mixed into it. It's It's like a really nice dark brown. I could probably leave or take this color because I can mix that color pretty well by using burnt sienna with my Payne's Gray. So it's got a spot on my palette, but if I found another color I wanted more, I would probably dump this one next. Although I can't think of another color that I really want right now. I'm pretty happy with what's in my palette right now. All right, there we go. Okay, and there you have it. It is a page full of dots, but it was a fun way to learn about the colors in my palette and just practice using my brush. So have fun with that, and I can't wait to be able to paint together something soon. But until now, or until then, oh my gosh, I'm really tired. Until then, you can do this. All right, I'm signing off now to go to bed. Good night.